All right, welcome back to another Wright Stew podcast. I am Paul Stewart.
And I am Brian Wright, still after our first little wild card experience yesterday for 2025.
Yeah, so NFL playoffs kicked off yesterday. Had a chance to watch the Chargers-Texans game as well as the Steelers-Ravens game last night. And as Brian and I were watching those games, there was a few things that we noticed, we learned, and we loved. So we're going to talk about things we noticed, learned, and loved yesterday. And so, Brian, the first one for me, I learned, and I may have known this by looking at the stats, but I learned that Justin Herbert only had 3 interceptions all regular season. And then in one game yesterday, eclipsed that with 4 interceptions.
Incredible, really. Incredible. I mean, you got to have time. You know, it really felt like they could not make an adjustment in regards to what the Texans were trying to do to him. You know, it's really interesting when you think about what a season is in the regular season and what a season is in the playoffs. And it just made, you know, they were apples and oranges. That was a complete opposite experience from what they did during the regular season. I mean, just the Chargers dominated them, and in this case, when it mattered, the Texans dominated. I learned you cannot trust long-term stats of how playoff games go in one isolated moment. You remember we talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
The road playoff team was a slight favorite in winning those games. Yeah. And clearly that did not matter. The home favorites won as kind of maybe not expected, but as it's more traditional.
The people of Houston really showed out, man. Great crowd yesterday, brought good energy, and I think it was a slow start for the Texans.
Yeah.
But other thing that I noticed, and it's an old NFL and old football adage, defense always travels. And they didn't have to travel anywhere, but that defense played really well, man. Especially the backside. Like they were getting after it. They were putting pressure on the quarterback, which helps out, right? But I mean, 4 picks in one game is pretty incredible. And one of those wasn't really Herbert's fault, but it was, I mean, defense travels. That's something I really noticed there. Here's another thing I learned, Brian. Don't bet against Coleridge Bernard Stroud the fourth. Now, most of us know that person as CJ Stroud. Coleridge Bernard Stroud the fourth. Did you know his real name was that?
I think I'd heard it earlier on, but Coleridge, I grew up near a town called Coleridge. And so it feels like a Confederate general's name, right? I mean,
maybe.
It's
the fourth. That's some deep roots.
That's some deep roots. That's going back several years, and it's an awesome name. I would have went with CJ too. If you get me to that kind of name, CJ, you know,
we'll stick with it. But so CJ Stroud's second year in the league, second playoff appearance, right? Made it as a rookie, and then won a game last year. This year, comes back and wins the game, and he may be one of those guys who we've talked about. It just figures out how to win games, and he really didn't do a ton yesterday. Again, it was defense. They put together a couple of the drives, but CJ Stroud is one of those guys who I think in an older nomenclature we called it a game manager, but I think that's kind of out the window now. Joe Mixon played really well, ran the ball really well, which they kind of got away from a little bit later in the season. But C.J. Stroud made the plays we needed to make him, made the throws, and did the right things to put his team in a position to win. So, yeah, I learned that, hey, don't bet against C.J. Stroud. So,
well, that's kind of where I was going. You know, I think game manager and the ultimate game manager was Tom Brady, and wouldn't we all want to be that kind of game manager, right? And so, you know, CJ, the game turned around on a botched, bad snap, rolling out to the right near the end zone, throwed back across the middle, kind of late, and just it's funny what can change the momentum of a game. That's what I mean. It was kind of a defensive just slugfest there for most of the first half, and then that happened, and it's like I don't know. Nico Collins is a difference maker. I noticed Lad McConkey may be the only receiver that can catch for the San Diego Chargers.
Yeah, they were having a tough time, man. It was Lad McConkey looked really good, but outside of that,
Man, I saw so many drops, but other guys, dude, it was
yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah. So I saw a statistic this morning where to Lad McConkey, Herbert was like 67% completion percentage, but to everybody else, he was like 20%. So clearly, either more confidence, more comfortable throwing a lad, or just a really bad day for the rest of the receiving corps. And based on season statistics, I think it was probably just a really bad day for the rest of them. Other thing I noticed, Brian, in reading some of the press clips this morning, the team was still behind Herbert. They didn't throw any, Herbert took responsibility for the game, but the offensive linemen, the rest of the team said, "Hey, that's our guy. That's who we want. Wouldn't change a thing." So when you hear things like that, it's reassuring and it's encouraging,
Yeah.
and it shows you that, hey, he's got the locker room, he's the leader, that's his team. The team's got his back, and they realize it. He picked kind of the worst time to have his worst game.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I didn't feel like the offensive coordinator. I didn't feel like they made adjustments quick enough on what they were trying to do. I feel like the Texans with C.J. Stroud and Nico, they went to that really quick, get it out of their hand, almost like old school, high school slant.
yeah,
Just
like West Coast, the West Coast offense, yeah.
yeah. Well, not even West Coast for the crisscrossing. They were just going straight up field, just getting out of his hand, dude. And it was the Texans outcoached and ultimately outplayed, but outcoached the Chargers, which I thought
Yeah.
the
So
Chargers.
that
Yeah.
leads me to pull away from the format for a second. I have a question for you. Is D'Amico Ryans one of, if not the most underrated coach in the NFL right now?
Well, that's where I was going last. I was going to go. I love how D'Amico Ryan's coaches. He has a good balance. I feel like of keeping the cool when the things are going out of control,
Yeah.
but then is able to go emotional when things are going really good. But when things are going bad, you don't see him flip out. He's one of those
Yeah.
rare guys who kind of comes back to here. It's up and then back to here. It's never you never see, at least the handful of games I've seen, you never see him go way down. I
Yeah.
would love to, and everybody says it. I mean, I think he's really a rare guy who's probably really intelligent, can emotionally control the room, respected, smart, and has put some guys in and knows how to motivate. I mean, I think even though you think about them as professional athletes, there's still a level to demanding their attention during the week that has to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe not motivating, these guys are getting paid, but demanding their attention. D'Amico Ryan's very much an underrated coach.
Yeah, yeah, and I think some of that comes to the division he plays in. That one doesn't get much respect, so there's not a whole lot to that. But all your points are very valid and very fair. I feel the same way. He seems to be very, hey, I'm under control. I'll get pumped up and excited for my team when I need to. But if things are hitting the fan, yeah, he remains calm.
Yeah, I think that's the key
He's
to it.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
steadfast at the wheel there. So, hey, so congratulations to the Houston Texans moving on, big win. So the second game of the day, the evening game, was kind of the big rivalry game. Steelers, Ravens, kind of just old school classic smash mouth football. Man, just a lot of fun to watch. The Ravens came out strong. So one of the first things I noticed in that game, Brian,
Mhm.
I would never want to be hit with a Derrick Henry stiff arm.
Oh gosh, dude, what a beast, man.
Oh, he had that one of those first runs in the first quarter. He kind of broke loose for the first time, and I forget who the defender was, but it's less of a stiff arm and more of just a jab,
Yeah.
just a punch, and he hit the guy right in the face, and he goes down. And I thought about myself now as an older, not older, but in my mid 40s, would be truly awful. But even as a younger man, that would be never be fun. So Derrick Henry just out of control out there, man. He's unstoppable.
Well, when you match him, and I'll jump, and I guess if we're starting with notice, I mean Lamar Jackson's feet can move so quick. I mean within the box. I mean, there were times where they kind of had him pinned in, but didn't have him pinned in, and he just creates more space, which gives times for receivers to create space. His feet are so good, and that was really. I mean, you would have fired everybody at the Titans for allowing him to get out of there right? King Henry. And I mean, all the way up to the ownership. There should be an opportunity for a recall or something. They ought to force the team, like they did Snyder with the Commanders, get rid of him.
Yeah.
They ought to force the Titans owner to get rid of the franchise because you should not. I mean, this is a match paired that feels very, especially as the weather gets colder. It feels very difficult in that 30 degrees, not great weather. Very difficult to stop that pair.
Yeah, and then they had Justice Hill as well, and
Yeah,
Justice
kind
it's
of the
kind of
change up.
different, yeah, kind of a different kind of back, and so that was one of the notes I had as well as I was watching was Lamar just looks different, right?
He
He
moves
looks
so
like he
good,
looks
dude.
like he's playing a video game.
Yes,
He looks like he's that kid at like 12 or 13 who looks like he's 17 and everybody else is still 12.
that's right. It moves a little bit faster. Ball comes out a little bit
Yeah,
quicker.
it just looks
Somebody's always
amazing.
open.
Uh,
Yeah.
so what? So one of the things, and I think we all knew that. So that's probably one of the things I love just watching Lamar Jackson. And then they had that drive when they literally ran the ball 13 times without pass and just drove it up the field. And it's almost I was sitting there thinking, Donald Trump has the "Make America Great Again" slogan. And it's almost like the Ravens slogan is "Make running the ball great again." Like
Yeah.
they make running the ball look fun.
Well,
Like
that's what I was.
and it is fun. It's fun to watch. Like because they
Yeah,
have
that
such
was. Yeah,
dynamic players.
totally just domination. From what I've noticed. There's a lot of guys who get a lot of recognition for sacking quarterbacks, but man, you got to have some weight to be able to keep yourself from being moved off that block, and
Yeah.
especially whenever you think about facing a team like the Ravens. I mean, that was a really, really, really challenging. I mean, first of all, it wasn't a great matchup for, even though it's a kind of a modern historical rivalry. It wasn't really a great matchup for the Pittsburgh because I feel like they're set up to rush the passer, and they're set up to kind of run the ball and throw the ball deep with Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
And that was just a tough matchup. Again, start of second half, they came out and kind of
They
made
did
it
throw the
look
ball
like
down
it
the
was
field,
almost
yeah.
going to be a game. But yeah, real quick that changed.
And so one of the other things I learned, and this is more of a question, I think the Ravens could bring back like the triple option. I mean, could you imagine having Lamar, Derrick Henry, and Justice Hill as three just options back there? I mean,
Well, I would like to see them they could bring back the wishbone and then put that
oh, wow.
gigantic fullback who's really a guard who weighs like 300 pounds, wears 42, and put him as the fullback. Then you have Justice Hill and Henry as the other. I mean, and you could do all kinds of variations of I really think you're absolutely right. If you weren't worried about injury, you could literally run like the wishbone offense,
Oh, wow.
and it would be terrible. Nobody wants to tackle Henry when he gets a little cool either. Nobody really wants to tackle him anyway.
No, no. One of the other things I noticed during the game last night, it didn't look like the Steelers even wanted to be there in the first half.
It was weird. It was
Just
weird.
in a Mike Tomlin coach team, and I know there's been rumblings of, hey, the Steelers, we get there, we're always over 500, and then we get bounced in the first round. There's no real longevity to any of our playoff runs, and there's even been rumors of like, hey, is it time to move on from Tomlin? And the Steelers historically, three coaches in the past, like 60 years: Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and then Mike Tomlin. And I mean, we've talked about some of the coaching carousel. Some coaches were fired after a year, especially, and for the Steelers to have that kind of longevity and really loyalty to one person, it says a lot about who that ownership team is. But Brian, what are your thoughts on? Is it time for a new voice? Is it time for a change in Pittsburgh?
No, I think maybe if we would have had so many failures or disappointments at Carolina, it's kind of you're spoiled as Pittsburgh fans just being good enough to make playoffs or being above 500. I know that's made out to be a lot, where Pittsburgh's had all these years never being below 500. Let me tell you, as a franchise who can't sniff 500 in the Panthers, Tomlin would, if he wanted to coach anymore, he would have a job anywhere else. I do think he's got some challenges in regards to the message still being received, because it didn't feel like Pittsburgh came out the same way that the Ravens did. And they felt flat. They didn't, I don't know. I don't know. You generally think that the personality of the team is from the team, but it didn't feel like it was as fired up. It didn't feel like it was quite as willing to do everything you got to do to try to stop Henry. But really tough.
In the second half, they played really well.
Yeah.
I mean, they scored. They came out fast. They had the 97-yard touchdown drive. They're getting the ball down the field, but not enough. A little too late, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And again, there's been questions kind of at the quarterback position there. Is Justin Fields the guy? Is Russell the guy? So
yeah. Hey, I also noticed. Hey, we got two Wilsons. I know Russell Wilson, Packer Badgers, played 3 years at NC State, then 1 year at Wisconsin, and then Peyton Wilson, linebacker for the Pittsburgh. I felt like he was getting rolled in and out, and I felt like they were taking advantage of it from a personnel standpoint. The guy, whether the other guy's considered the starter or the backup, I believe it's number 50, cannot nearly run. Probably supposed to be much more of a run stopper, gap to gap guy. But man, it felt like anytime he was in the game, he couldn't run down Henry. He definitely couldn't run down Lamar. Just a totally different. And I know defensively you change in and out linebackers. Peyton is still considered a young linebacker, but I hope to see him get more of the starting role next year and playing 90% of the snaps instead of playing probably 40% of the stats, maybe 50.
And so another holistic on the whole day thing. One of the things I really loved, man, how cool is it that both Harbaugh brothers are such successful coaches? I mean, I know, Jim lost his game and John won his game. But they've met in the Super Bowl. They're in the playoffs every year. They've won collectively a national title at the NCAA level. Like, what's going on in the Harbaugh household growing up? I mean, are they sitting there talking X and O's at breakfast? Are they using salt and pepper shakers to design plays? I mean, that's incredible.
I think it's kind of a testament that a lot of times it's not, and maybe they know a ton. Maybe they can go in and coach, but Harbaugh at the Ravens, he was a special teams coach, right? Yeah. And not that he didn't know, he came up through the special teams. And then Harbaugh, that's at the Chargers, was clearly a quarterback, Bears, but feels more like he played linebacker, right? When you think about how he interacts and what his teams that are really good defensively. And so it really feels like they're both culture setters, and they're both relationship builders. And, Harbaugh with the Ravens was willing to, you got to remember, Lamar 7-8 years ago, when he was getting drafted, there were some people saying, hey, he's definitely not a first rounder. He's definitely not ready to come into play. So they're also their own independent thinkers, right? They're not going to listen to the outside noise and pundits. And I mean, think about how different that franchise is and his experience with the Ravens is if Lamar is not there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, two-time, potentially three-time MVP. So, that's it.
Yeah, incredible.
So, last one I saw, and this is totally out of the box, that I love, and I love this every time. And, Brian, you and I had a chance to go to an Orioles game last summer. So, we watched the national anthem, and I love it when they get to the part in Baltimore when they say, oh.
Yeah.
And the whole crowd yells, oh, for the Baltimore Orioles. That gets me every time. I love it so much. And then when they announced the national anthem yesterday, they said the place where the national anthem was written by Francis Scott Key is like, oh man, they're really flexing on this national anthem here tonight. They're really, really showing out. So I love it. So if you've never been to an Orioles game or a Ravens game, it's kind of a customary thing that the fans do. They say, oh, when it's, during that part of the anthem. Similarly here, in Raleigh at NC State, when you say red, everybody yells red during the national anthem in honor of one of the school's colors. So I like little traditions like that. I think it's fun. It brings a lot of character and as silly as it is, kind of unites people. So I like that.
It does, and which was kind of the pushback from a handful of years ago when people were kneeling for it and kind of somehow not happy with the national anthem and the whole shebang. So it should be a unifying event. right? Hey, we're getting ready to go play each other, but we're all under this. We're all lucky to be here, kind of deal.
Oh yeah.
And so, hey, last thing, you kind of hit on it earlier, but I would have said my loved would have been definitely the drive. I mean, we would have to go back and look, but what was it, 13 straight runs where they ran the ball,
13.
scored. That was ultimately my loved. I mean, that was being able to run, the old school offenses, but dude, just incredible. I really think they could go into a game and not pass the ball like 1924, and it would really make it really challenging for any opponent at this point. So, hey, I think it kind of makes me love the Ravens that much more for the Super Bowl. I mean, as a real contender.
Well, as you get into situations when you may have to go to Buffalo or Kansas City with some weather conditions, running travels, right? Sometimes it's tough to pass in snow and wind and things like that, but running the ball is, I mean, it's just kind of gritty, tough.
And Henry's size travels too. He's that big. Yeah. I mean, somebody may not block as well. You may run into a matchup, but he's going to be that big regardless. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. So I think you're right, Brian. I think it really does say, well, like maybe, and not that anybody was doubting the Ravens' ability, but it's like maybe that does catapult them to the AFC title game or to the Super Bowl, right? Where
I kind of feel like if I was rebetting it, and again, Ravens would probably be my favorite right now, just with everything. So anyway.
Yeah, until you see the Chiefs play next week, and then we'll
the Chiefs. I mean, let's be honest. The Chiefs all year have just kind of been, hey, I'm a better quarterback. I'm better coach.
They're just getting it done. Yeah, just getting it done. So, so a few more games today. We'll be watching those closely as well, and give you some feedback on those tomorrow with what we learned, loved, and liked. But make sure you're following us on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Apple Pod, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We appreciate y'all listening. Hey, as it's cold, as you're sitting around today, hey, make sure you gear up, get some episodes downloaded for tomorrow morning as well as you get your commute back to work. A lot of good content out there, some long forms are fun to listen to if you're sitting in traffic. So we appreciate y'all listening. Enjoy those games today.
Out, go Pack.